Hello, trumpet players. I've been promising a video and about 3 different other videos about how I see what I teach in the context of what is taught by those people who we regard as the greats. Okay, because I think there's a lot of, if you're not asking this question, why not? Right? If you're not asking this kind of question, shame on you. Okay? If you're not wondering, why would somebody who's just some nobody have so much to say about trumpet when we can just go straight to Alan Vizzuti or Arturo Sandoval or Maurice Andre, or I mean there's a whole bunch of famous, successful, wonderful trumpet players out there. Where does my teaching fit in all of that? I mean, clearly you would have to be kind of like nuts in the head. I mean, I would have to be, not you, I'm sorry. I would have to be kind of nuts in the head to think that I'm at the same level as they are. Both in regards to playing the horn in their performance and also in the pedagogy. Right? What they teach is obviously going to be at a higher level than what I teach. So why would I even open my mouth at all? That's and if you're not asking that question about me, and for that matter, every other trumpet player that you get information from out on the internet, then you're not being very careful about your own education. Because that's an important question. If you're not asking that question, if you're getting your information from someone like me, some nobody on YouTube or online, and that person doesn't have a legitimate response to that question, then how do you know? See, that's the problem with so much information, right? It used to be, and I've said this in other videos before, it used to be that information was like gold. And it was worth gold, right? For you to have a lesson with somebody famous, the whole point of that was to get the information that nobody else had. That doesn't exist anymore. That environment doesn't exist anymore. You can get any information anywhere, anytime. Just pick up your phone and ask Google. So it's no longer about information, right? Anyway, the reason I brought that up is because there's too much information now. And what I've seen a lot, okay, so here's a pattern that happens with me as a teacher, right? Someone will come to me for lessons. And, one of the things I try to do is I try to find out, hey, why are you here? Right? I'm not a clone maker. I don't make Eddie Lewis clones. There wouldn't be any point in that anyway, right? That's not my objective. My objective is to help you get to where you're going, and I have to know where you're going to do that. Right? So a lot of times the students come in and a lot of what they're struggling with is stuff that they picked up online, information that they got online for free, and so one of the most common things that happens in that context is that they get they apply that to them. You ever heard of that term hypochondriac? I think that's the right word. Somebody who, if they're reading in a website or something about a disease, they start thinking, hey, I've got all those symptoms, I must have that disease, right? I think that's what that's called, a hypochondriac. There's a whole bunch of trumpet hypochondriacs out there that they read something, someone will say, and you know what? There's no shortage of people who will say that the panacea to every problem is their little solution, right? And I've seen so many, now that they have these trumpet groups on Facebook, they are all present. So you say, and it doesn't matter what problem you post, right? You post on there, having problem with range. Well, long tones. One guy will say the answer is always long tones. The other guy will say the answer is always Arbin book. And another guy will say the answer is always breathing. Oh my, that's just like, you gotta be kidding me. So yes, there's no shortage of people out there that'll tell you what is wrong with you. Facebook is a great example. You want people to tell you exactly what's wrong with you? Go to Facebook and ask, hey, what's wrong with you? You don't even have to post any playing. You don't have to post any background. You don't have to post any details whatsoever. They'll tell you precisely what is wrong with you. So yes, the problem online right now is that there's too much information. And so how am I tying this into my attitude towards the greats? Well, I have a great deal of respect for the greats. I learn from the greats. Whenever I find like one of their master classes online on YouTube or whatever, I'll watch the master class. If I have an opportunity to go see a master class live, I do that. I don't do as much of that as I used to when I was younger, because I'm working so much and I can't afford to give up a day's worth of lessons to go to the school and listen to these guys, right? But if it's on YouTube or reading their articles and stuff like that, I learn from all of these guys. Okay? And because of that, by the way, because of that, there's a certain number of YouTube trumpet people that you can tell right off shouldn't get your attention whatsoever, right? I'm not putting them down, and I'm not going to mention who they are, because they're trying, and you have to admire their effort and stuff like that. But when it comes to trumpet, what they're teaching, why are you listening to these guys and not listening to Phil Smith or Arturo Sandoval? And I mean, there's so much great information online. Why would you get your information from these guys? Anyway, and here's the thing, is how do you know that I'm not one of those? And that's what I'm trying to answer. That's the question I'm trying to answer now. How do you know I'm not one of those? And where does my teaching fit in all of that? Well, let me first say that as much as I respect the greats, it is my religious belief that the way I'm supposed to operate is I'm not supposed to be a respecter of persons. So even though I greatly respect, okay, so the play on words here, when I say respect, um, I mean in an honorable sense. The respect of persons thing is when you're talking about giving favor to one person over another person. I don't do that. So, for example, I told you that I learned from all the greats. But you know who else I learned from is my students. How much have I learned from my students? You can't believe it. I would go as far as to say I learned as much from my students as I do from the greats. For entirely different reasons, but it happens. See, there's some things that the greats don't understand and probably never will understand. The greats haven't taught hundreds of beginners. Right? I stopped counting my students after 500. And that's private students. And of those 500, I'd say at least 2/3 of them were beginners. But that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm pointing out now is that I am not a respected person. So what does that mean? So if one of the greats tells me through one of their workshops or YouTube video or whatever, that the answer to everything is the Arbin. Practice the Arbin, practice the Arbin, practice the Arbin. That will give you fix all your problems. Well, as someone who's not a respecter of persons, a stupid statement is still just a stupid statement. Okay? And see, that's where some people, because you have to understand this, there's a lot of music worshipers, trumpet worshipers out there. And to those trumpet worshipers, the trumpet is their god, and the greats that we're talking about are the demigods. Okay? They're like musical saints put on earth that can do no wrong. And that's just not true. They're human, right? And it's possible for them to say stupid stuff. Okay, someone says long tones are the answer to every problem. That's still a stupid statement. Lip slurs are the answer to every problem. That's still a stupid statement. I don't care who it comes from. It's still stupid. Yoga breathing is the answer to every problem. That's still a stupid statement. So, you see what I'm saying? Okay? So, that's one thing I'm trying to point out, is that the respect I have for them does not go so far as just blindly following everything they say, as if this is all part of a religion and thou shalt not go against the greats. Okay? I am not and hope to never be disrespectful towards the greats. I treat them the way I would treat my quote-unquote elders. They've been there, they've done that, and they deserve the respect that, and so, for example, I wouldn't be one of those idiots that would go up to let's say one of them was giving a master class or something. I'm not going to challenge them. If one of them says long tones is the answer to everything, well, that's their master class. I'm not going to be one of those idiots that goes up and tries to now make a big deal out of it, because that's disrespectful. Okay? Just as much as I wouldn't do that for example, for somebody who's a student of mine giving a master class to maybe let's say he's a high school student and he's giving a master class for some junior high students. I'm not going to in the middle of the master class stop him and say, hey, you know what, you're wrong. So that's what I mean by not a respecter of persons. I give equal respect to the people at the bottom as I do to the people at the top. Okay? It's all contextual. So that's one thing, is you won't find me worshiping the greats. Okay? They are a source of inspiration. They are a source of experience. When they share their experience, that's something that's extremely valuable. Stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that everything that comes out of their mouths is true. It doesn't mean that everything that comes out of their mouths is expedient. Okay? It doesn't work like that. Okay, so now that you understand that and what my opinion is towards the greats, and that I learn just about everything I know about trumpet comes from the greats. Right? Just about everything I know comes from them. So I'm at a graduation right now. So the graduates are showing up in the parking lot. We do 3 graduations this weekend with the brass quintet, Texas Brass. So that's what I'm down in Angleton, or no, not Angleton, but one of those cities down on the coast, Lake Jackson or something like that. All right, so now let's get to the point. Where does my information fit into all that? Well, basically, I have different ways of saying some of this stuff. I think what I share is different. And the fact that it's rooted in what the greats teach. So that's the thing about all of my stuff. The books, what I teach in the lessons, everything that I teach, everything that I share is stuff I learned first from other people, and then over the years took that. And for example, you know what one of my biggest complaints about routines, trumpet routines out there, oh, have you tried this routine and that teacher's routine and that person's routine, right? Those routines were written by those people for those people, right? And, someone who only has a range up to tuning note C, what are they going to do with that? And in fact, I think a lot of times, most of what the greats teach for 90% of the people that are listening goes way over their heads. And that's where I come in. Okay, even though I have a whole bunch of what seem on the surface to be completely revolutionary ideas and concepts and theories and philosophies, they seem to be revolutionary. But all of it is rooted in the trumpet tradition, which comes from the greats, right? You have to acknowledge the greats. If you don't acknowledge the greats, there is no trumpet tradition, right? So all of it is rooted in the trumpet tradition. And I think one of the things that the way I teach one of the things that gets twisted around is that I apply my Christian principles, let's call it principles, Christian principles, along with, so this is something I haven't said, I consider myself a stoic person, stoic in the adjective sense, not the noun sense. I do not follow the stoic philosophy. I'm not a member of that group. I use that word as an adjective. I am a stoic Christian musician. Does that make sense? That plays trumpet. Okay, let me get it. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. And part of what you're getting from my teaching is, so how long have I been studying the greats? I've been studying the greats since the late 70s. The first master class I was part of, now he was a sax player, but Harvey Piddell, when I was living in Hawaii. After that it was Clark Terry. Clark Terry was the first trumpet master class I ever went to. And he talked about his syllables and all that. And what a tremendous impact that had on me. You know, he talked about shaping every note with your mouth, with your oral cavity. Wow. How cool is that, right? And I was only like 16 years old when I heard that master class. But yes, it's been that long since I've been studying the greats, going to master classes, reading their books, reading their articles, now that we have YouTube, watching their YouTube videos and stuff like that. So what I do with all that is pass it through my stoic Christian filter. And the teacher part of me knows how to take all of that stuff I've digested over the years and break it down into bits that you can digest. That's where I fit in all this. I'm still nobody. I'm not going to be a famous trumpet player because that's never what I wanted. I told people in college that we had a big old fight about it. They thought I was being sarcastic or something. They asked, don't you want to be the best trumpet player in the world? I said, no. That's not what music is about. To me, music is about expressing yourself. Does it matter if I'm expressing myself here at a graduation ceremony or expressing myself on a European tour? I don't see any difference between those two. And the people who do see a difference between those two probably shouldn't be on the European tour, as far as I'm concerned. I shouldn't say European tour, world tour today. Used to be in the old days of if you did a European tour, you were hot stuff. Today, I think that's too small potatoes, right? But yeah, to me, music, my efforts in music are to express myself and in a way that other people can get something meaningful out of that. That's a very important part of it. Okay, so and in that regard, I'll never be famous. I'll never be an Arturo Sandoval. I'll never be a Maurice Andre. I'll never be Wynton Marsalis, right? I'll never be one of those guys. I'll never be on the same roster with the rest of them, okay? And you know what? Part of the reason for that is because I don't think I'll ever be the kind of name that will draw a crowd. Because, that's a whole different ball game. To draw a crowd is not the same thing as having a meaningful musical conversation with the audience. That's not the same thing. And you know what? In the trumpet God community, where everybody worships the trumpet, that is like nirvana at the top, right? When you're on stage and for a famous, high-profile, very prestigious performance, for the trumpet worshipers, that's nirvana. That's the ultimate heaven, right? I'm going to tell you that doesn't appeal to me anymore. I'm not saying I wouldn't do the gig, right? I'm not saying I wouldn't take the gig, but I'm saying that this playing in a brass quintet while everybody else is chatting, it may seem like it's less musically important, but that's only true if you look at music from a trumpet worship perspective. Okay? You can this gig I'm doing now is to me just as meaningful as if I had been on stage at some high-profile, very prestigious, let's say a jazz festival or a classical musical festival or something like that. Okay? So no, I am never going to be someone who draws a big crowd. And that's how you become one of those greats, right? That's the magic formula for becoming a great. Is that you have to be able to provide, to bring in the numbers. You got to be able to do that. And that's never going to be me. That goes contrary to my personality. Okay? I'm a hardcore introvert, and I would much rather... we won't go into that right now. So yes, that's where I see my teaching. My teaching is rooted in the greats. It's rooted in traditional trumpet wisdom, whatever you want to call it. But it's tempered by my belief as a Christian. It's tempered by my stoicism. And so when I teach something and someone says, well, so-and-so does it this way, that's good. There's a book that I read that changed everything for me. What's it called? It's Bob Finley on trumpet. And before I read that book, I couldn't understand why so many people, I knew it was possible, I knew what was going on, I just didn't have an understanding of it. Why were so many people contradicting each other, trumpet players? There's people that say, well, we're all basically saying the same thing, but in different ways. Well, that's just not true. And I knew that different players were doing it different ways, but how were they getting the same results? And the Bob Finley book hits that perfectly. The Bob Finley book talks about the different sources of resistance and how that balances out with the air. So now, when I go to let's say a master class or something, and listen to someone like Charlie Geyer or something like that, giving a master class. What I do now is I categorize them according to where they fit on that 7 sources of resistance thing. So, like, for example, Jim Thompson, I went to a master class with Jim Thompson at Rice. This was years ago. And because of the fact that I read the Bob Finley book, I recognize where he fit on Bob Finley's explanation on the spectrum of what he, based on what he was saying. And the way Jim Thompson teaches, am I saying the right name? Anyway, the way he teaches is almost opposite the way I teach. And you know what? I can teach the way he teaches. If that's what the student needs, that's what I do. Okay? But the way he teaches is, in terms of that balance that Finley talks about, he's on the other end of the balance from me. And I recognize that immediately because of Bob Finley's book. I hope that makes sense. So to me, when I hear all these different people, I think it's a huge mistake to assume the way some people do, that everybody does it the same way, they just say it differently. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. Not true at all. There are different ways to play the trumpet. And there's different ways to play the trumpet well. There's different ways to play the trumpet correctly. And you know, my experience as a teacher is that I take all this stuff that I've learned from these people who I respect so much, and what I learned from my students, right? Oh, you cannot imagine how much I value my students and how much they contributed to where I am today as a teacher. You can't even imagine it. But anyway, all of that comes together, and God gave me this ability to take all of this that I know, all this stuff that has soaked into my head. He's given me this ability to take the bits and pieces that my students need at that time in their development and present it in a way that they can digest it. That's my strength as a teacher. I'm not just like a parrot repeating back what the greats said. You know what? This is something that my wife helped me with about 8 years ago. You know, a lot of times she'll be sitting in the living room, I'm teaching in the music room, and she can hear the whole lesson. And she told me that the way I was teaching, because I was trying to credit every source of every piece of information that came from me, and she said that's ruining the lessons. She says you have to take ownership of what you've learned. That doesn't mean to be disrespectful to the people you learned it from. But you know, she's right. It was ruining the lessons because I was having to. She said it almost sounded apologetic, and now that I'm looking back, yes, it sounded apologetic. It's almost as if, you know, I didn't want to take credit for all these wonderful things I was teaching. But this jumping through hurdles trying to get myself to not take credit was actually ruining the experience for the students. So I stopped about 8 years ago. I stopped crediting the sources of the ideas I was sharing with the students. So now when I speak to a student, I just tell them this, that, this, that. Okay, and I do it in a way that hopefully makes it easier for them to digest, right? To get into their system, right? But yeah, you know, just because I don't credit the sources doesn't mean that I guess I should make that clear. The only reason I don't credit the sources anymore is for the flow of the lesson. It was killing the flow of the lesson. Okay? And you know what else? I think sometimes it makes it look like, when you try to credit the source of the information, it makes it look like you're trying to show off how much you know and who you know and what master classes you went to and just how connected you are and stuff like that. I think sometimes it gives that impression. And if you can't stand on your own 2 feet. Anyway, so this one's getting long, but this was a video I had promised. And because I think it's important, if you're not asking this about the people you're getting information from online, that's a problem. You should be very careful about where your information's coming from in today's age. Because you know what? This is something I learned about Trumpet. I wanted to buy, in the 90s, I decided I wanted to buy every Trumpet book that was out there. Do you know what? There's not enough time. Barely even enough time to read the books. But beyond that, even if you could read the book, how much of it are you going to try? Because to really try the book, you're looking at months of effort, and there's just too many books to do that with. So, I started realizing I needed to be more selective but now that we have all this, it's not, I think because there's so much information out there, I think it's like we think we can just bombard ourselves with so much of it, and then whatever is valuable will just pop out. But it's actually possible, because there's so much information out there. It's actually possible to drown yourself in bad information, completely drown out every bit of good information, because this whole trying to go for volume thing, it's not going to work. It won't work. I promise you. You have to be more selective about who you're listening to. And if you're not, so if you're one of those that just came to my channel learning my stuff, this should have been a question you've been asking all along. Who does this guy think he is? You should have been asking that. What is the value that I have to offer? If it just sounds good to you, that's not good enough. And I want to caution you, if it sounds good to you, and I'm not talking about their playing, I'm talking about what they say. If it sounds good, that's not good enough. So if you hear somebody that sounds good, in fact, some people who sound good are dangerous. And some of the people who sound like they're saying it badly are the ones that are getting it right. Okay? So yeah, I want to caution you. Don't go around just grabbing information from every source. Okay? That's what I have for you. That's where I fit in the whole scheme. I am somebody that learns from all the greats. I admire and I'm inspired by the greats. I learn from the greats. I internalize it all. I chew it all up, digest it, and then I share it with you. That's my perspective on and my relationship with the greats. Okay? All right, well, I better get in there. God bless you guys. We'll see you on the next video.